Well, friends, good evening and welcome to the final public forum of 2021, presented by the Center for Theology and the Natural Sciences and co-sponsored by the Richard S. Dinner Center for Jewish Studies. I'm Robert Russell, the founder and director of CTNS and the Ian G. Barber Professor of Theology and Science here at the Graduate Theological Union. This year, CTNS is celebrating its 40th anniversary. Beginning in 1981, our mission has been to promote the creative mutual interaction between theology and science by sponsoring research, teaching, and public service programs, such as tonight's forum, that are national and international in scope, and both ecumenical and interfaith in character. Our speaker is eminently qualified to offer us a Judaic critique of transhumanism. Dr. Hava Tirosh-Samuelson is Regents Professor of History, Irvine and Marion Lowe Professor of Modern Judaism, and Director of Jewish Studies at Arizona State University in Tempe, Arizona. She is a distinguished Jewish intellectual historian who focuses on the interplay of philosophy and mysticism, Judaism and science, and Judaism and ecology. Within the field of science and religion, Tirosh-Samuelson explores the interplay of religion, science, and technology with a focus on transhumanism and the relationship between Judaism, science, and medicine. In addition to over 50 essays and book chapters, she is the author of Between Worlds, the life and work of Rabbi David ben Judah Messer Leon, which received the award of the Hebrew University for the best work in Jewish history in 1991, and the author of Happiness in Pre-Modern Judaism, Virtue, Knowledge, and Well-Being in Pre-Modern Judaism, and Religion and Environment, The Case of Judaism. Hava was the 2017 CTNS Russell Family Fellow, offering a Fellows Public Forum and Research Conference on Religion, Science, and Technology, Jewish Perspectives. It is a delight, personally, to welcome her back tonight to present her lecture titled Transhumanism as Contemporary Idolatry, a Judaic Critique. And I'll just say, after our speaker's presentation, there'll be time for questions from the Zoom audience. And you can also post your questions in the chat room. Hava, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and I'm really looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Bob. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. Good evening, everybody. Let me say a word by way of self-introduction so you understand where I'm coming from. So as you just heard, I'm an intellectual, a Jewish intellectual historian. I was born in Israel in a kibbutz. I'm a Jew by birth and by choice, of course. And my scholarship focuses on Judaism, namely the entire scope of Jewish history, religion, and culture. In the first half of my academic career, I focused primarily on pre-modern Jewish philosophy and mysticism. But in the last 2 decades or so, I moved into the areas that Bob just described to you, namely religion and science and religion and ecology. Now, this biographical information is relevant for 2 reasons. First of all, I'm an intellectual historian rather than a computer scientist. So I approach transhumanism as a cultural and social force or social movement rather than as a scientist. Transhumanism, as far as I'm concerned, is an intellectual movement that impacts the world. Because I'm not a computer scientist and I'm not a scientist of robotics, I do not make judgment about the feasibility of various elements in the transhumanist futurist agenda. Instead, I'm interested in the desirability of the transhumanist agenda and the implication of transhumanism to our life in the present. So that's the first point by way of introduction. The second point is that when I say that I'm speaking from a Judaic perspective, I always remember that many other Jews will not agree necessarily with what I say or how I present Judaism. So I have no authority to speak for Jews or for Judaism. What I'm telling you is how I, on the basis of the Jewish tradition, understand the challenges posed by transhumanism. So one more terminological clarification so we can start going. I'm going to speak on transhumanism and I'm going to distinguish it from post-humanism. So transhumanism is the vision about the transformation of the human species by means of technoscience, as well as the steps that you need to take in order to affect this transformation. Transhumanism is thus the belief that humans can and should transform the human species by means of technology, but it's also the process. So that's transhumanism. It's the process by which humanity will accomplish that transition. Posthumanism, on the other hand, is the goal, or the telos. It's what transhumanists seek to attain. And what they seek to attain is the liberation of humans from biological existence, or from the limitations of biology. Since the telos is both the efficient cause and the desired end, I use the term together. A lot of time you can see it, you can think or you imagine it with a kind of a backslash. So I speak about trans and posthumanism, but do understand that there is a difference between them. Now, the structure of my talk is simple. Because I'm an historian, I'm going to try to give you an historical overview here. How to think about transhumanism. We didn't start yesterday. There's a history that I would like to share with you so you understand why it is worthy of discussion. In the second part, I will speak about main themes of transhumanism, and that part especially has been published in various places, including in Science and Theology, which is published by CTNS, as well as other essays that I've written. So you can read the details in those publications. And the last part is transhumanism as techno-idolatry, and that's kind of my critique of transhumanism. So with that structure in mind, let me bring to your attention an interesting quote from Eric Schmidt. Everybody knows him. He's the founder of Google, who in a recent interview with Maureen Dowd in the New York Times, that was October 31st, 2021, said the following: "We are not simply the makers of AI technology who can control it for our independent purposes. Rather, technology is already manipulating us." Keep that statement in mind. That would be a factor or feature of some of the criticisms I will share. So if you understand kind of where we are going and how we approach it, let's delve right into it. So the first part is on transhumanist futurism, and try to give you a brief historical overview. The reason it's so hard to talk about transhumanism is the fact that transhumanism is very decentralized. There's no systematic or coherent ideology. It's much more diffuse than you would imagine. So when I talk about transhumanism, to some extent, I put some coherence into it, more probably than what you'll find. But minimally, transhumanism is an attempt to advocate the transformation of humanity by technoscience. It is a short form. Transhumanism stands for transitional human. That's the shift from the biological human to the technological post-human. Transhumanism is not a scientific program, but a futuristic scenario. So it has a lot of ideas. It's more like an agenda. It's more like almost, I would say, a worldview rather than a clear program. I suggest that the major theme in it is the notion of extreme progress due to the convergence of biotechnology, genomics, nanotechnology, informatics, and artificial intelligence. So what you have here is a notion that humanity needs to take charge of the evolutionary process and intervene in the process in order to accomplish the transition to ultimately the post-human. And as I said in the beginning, transhumanism, I treat it as a social cultural trend or trends that inspires that impacts contemporary life. So what's my point? My point is how we imagine the human or how we imagine the future will determine what we're going to do in the present. So a scenario about the future is very crucial to the action we are going to take and to the kind of life we're going to lead. So transhumanism comes in various flavors, as I call them. I give you some of them: the anarchist, the libertarian. There's a little bit of overlap there. The hedonistic, the democratic, the eschatological. So you have various ways of approaching it, but all of it is based on the notion that the process and the progress that they are advocating is inevitable. So there's an inevitable progression in the evolutionary process to end in this picture of, this is obviously an imagined picture, but this will give you kind of the sense that transhumanism has something to do with spiritual goals and spiritual visions that go beyond the evolutionary biological process. Now, why should we care about transhumanism? Again, I suggest to you that transhumanism is important because even though it's a very small movement, just a few thousand people who will define themselves as transhumanists, every aspect of our contemporary life is impacted by it. You'll find transhumanist themes in film, in media, in video games, in performance art, of course, in literature. And transhumanism attracts a whole kind of a slew of people, different kind of people that include scientists, computer experts, space explorers, engineers, technology enthusiasts, gamers, tech entrepreneurs, science fiction writers and fans, strategists, and futurists. So it's very, very complex in its social makeup, but those people imagine the future of the human species in a certain way. So how far back should we go in order to tell the story of transhumanist movement? Transhumanism, the transhumanists themselves go back to the Renaissance. They try to claim that their roots can be found in the writings of Renaissance authors such as Francis Bacon or Pico della Mirandola, and of course in Enlightenment thinkers. But the term itself was coined by Julian Huxley, and only in 1957, even though some of the ideas that he came up with were already articulated in this early work of his, New Bottles for New Wine, which appeared in 1927. So when he talked about transhumanism, Julian Huxley, many people know of him. He was a very famous person who was for 2 years, he was the head of UNESCO, for example, the first head of UNESCO. And he defines transhumanist for him, transhumanism was another word for evolutionary humanism, namely the deliberate effort by humankind to transcend itself, not just sporadically, but in its entirety as humanity. Man remaining man, himself by realizing new possibilities of and for his human nature. So this is the vision that was clearly very much in place in 1957, and he was by no means alone. These are his other two friends, colleagues, people who he was very close to, John Burton Sanderson Haldane, a very important scientist, and John Desmond Bernal, also a very important scientist. And the three of them, close to Haldane and Bernal, were actually very involved with the Communist Party and very connected to the ideology of progress and the role of science in the Soviet Union. Less so Julian Huxley, but the three of them were very much they share the same worldview. So already in the 20s and the 30s, Huxley, Haldane, and Bernal advocated many views that eventually became standard themes, sorry, they're missing S there, of transhumanism. So some of those themes include the belief in the ongoing progressive evolution of the human species, the advocacy of genetic engineering, which at the time was eugenics, and Huxley was a proponent of eugenics, and even after World War II, he still was for it. The replacement of religion by science as the arbiter of truth, the expansion of capacity by means of human intervention, and the unbound faith in the ability of science and technology to manufacture a perfect future. So the notion of betterment, the notion of perfection is very much experienced here, expressed here in secular terms by scientists. Each one was in a different field of science, but that's very much part of the story of how transhumanist vision began already, I would say, in the 1920s and the 1930s. So the next phase in the historical development is cybernetics. The trauma of World War II made the intervention, or the intention, I should say, the intention to better humanity by means of technoscience much more acute. During the 1940s, especially in England, cybernetics, namely the science of steersmanship, was developed as the study of control and communication in the animal and the machine. And that included or consisted of systematic study of complex systems such as learning, cognition, adaptation, emergence, communication, and efficiency. All of these were put together by a group of thinkers, especially in England. These are some of the people that are relevant to the development of cybernetics. And what you have here is kind of the emergence of a new interdisciplinary endeavor that integrates physics, biology, brain science, psychiatry, engineering, politics, economics. All of these take inspiration from ecology, from art, from architecture and management. So it was a very important development in the 40s, and especially in the years after the war, during the Macy conferences in New York. That was clearly the beginning of a new development in system theories, in computer sciences, in information technology, and all of them integrated engineering, mathematics, and psychology. What's the point? The point is that with cybernetics, we begin to think about humans as ultimately bytes of information. This is the beginning, right after World War II. And what I will argue toward the end of the lecture is that we have all become basically data or info behind by companies, and that would be one of the major complaints that I have against the transhumanist movement as an ideology and as an approach to life. Now, in the 1960s, we are moving forward. In the 1960s, there's new optimistic futurism. And it was articulated primarily by famous science fiction writers such as Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, Stanislav Lem, and Bruce Sterling a little bit later, Greg Egan, Vernon Vinge, Neil Stephenson. A lot of people in science fiction actually became relevant to the emergence of this technological imagination. Indeed, science fiction did as much as anything else in the 20th century to push youngsters into engineering and to fuel the technological imaginations. Let me tell you that Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos, three people that I will come back to in the last section of the lecture, all devoured science fiction as boys. And having read stories about world building as boys, these mega rich men, I should say, are determined to realize their fantasies by building worlds in which we are all trapped, ensnared by trappings and foibles of capitalism. That would be one of my arguments. So how you imagine the future, what do you think should happen, depends a lot of who you are. You can't tell the story of transhumanism without putting some attention some attention to that kind of notion. So what happens in the 60s and especially in the early 70s, we begin to have a new kind of a culture, technological culture, futuristic culture that experimented with certain ideas. Some of those ideas actually have to do with a desire to reach immortality by means of cryonics. And that will be a theme that will be very important to transhumanism. That's already in place in the 1970s. A person who was very important to bring together a lot of ideas that became important in the transhumanist movement later on is this person. I don't know if people have heard about him. His name is Friedun Esfandiary, and he was a son of an Iranian diplomat. He was born in Belgium, educated in the United States for 2 years. Actually, he was in Jerusalem, I believe from 1952 to 1954. And he began to articulate ideas that we will associate with transhumanism. 1970, you see, it's all in the same all this time frame. 1970s changed his name to FM 2030, the year of his 100th birthday. He didn't make it. He didn't live to that. He's not going to live to that because he already died in 2000, short of his 70th birthday. But many of his ideas, like the idea of supercharging the human brain via genetic and bioengineering, came from him. Obliteration is means of technology. Immortality is technologically possible. He definitely believed in that. Fantasies or fantasizing about space colonization and technology as a god that would save humanity. All that was already stated in the 2 books that I listed for you on this slide. Optimism 1, The Emerging Radicalism, and Upwingers, A Futurist Manifestors. Of course, he's the upwingers opposed to the downwingers. So here's kind of the outline of some of the framework in terms of the time. So 1960s, you've got some the people that I mentioned before, the science fiction authors. 1960s was also the counterculture revolution. There's a lot of experimentation with drugs and expansion of human consciousness. There's the human potential movement that imagined kind of the capacity to become divine or godlike. That's articulated or coined by Abraham Maslow. Cryonics, which I mentioned before, is also developing at the same time in the 60s and the 70s. And you get the sense of where things are coalescing already in the 60s and the 70s. Definitely by the 1980s, you have a whole new development because we have development of computer science. And that's the time already in the 80s and later on in the 90s, people like Marvin Minsky, an important computer scientist, Hans Moravec, Ray Kurzweil, I'm sure you know those names. They are beginning to imagine the replacement of humanity by Robo sapiens who will be in competition with Homo sapiens. So the Transhumanist Manifesto is 1982. I wanted to give you this timeline to see where it kind of had to position those various stages. And 1998 is the World Transhumanist Association. That's when it's founded. It's going to change its name to Humanity Plus later on. So in terms of individuals, there are various individuals. I give you the names of some of those people, and I can and I have a separate slide to show you the pictures of some of these people. But there are various people. Each one of these thinkers contributes something which is not identical, and that's what makes the discussion about transhumanism a little bit challenging. So Natasha Vita-More was very important. She was born Nancy Clark, and she took the name Vita-More. More is the signifier of what transhumanism is about. You need to be more beautiful, of course, richer. Of course, you have to be stronger, smarter, faster. So this kind of more. She's married to Max More, also born on a different name. I think it's actually O'Connor with an O in the... Each of these people writes something else. So, and has a different background, a different emphasis. Let me show you some of these pictures. So this is Ray Kurzweil. I'm sure many people know him. Ray Kurzweil is an inventor, is a very famous engineer who really shaped a lot of our understanding of the relationship between humanity and machines. And he imagines the development that we are going to reach the singularity point, which is kind of what I would call an apocalyptic moment in the development of humanity, where we're going to, it's kind of a rupture, a technological rupture, if you wish. This is Nick Bostrom, who is philosophically probably the most important contributor to transhumanism. If you want to read some of his book, you just go on his website and you'll see all his essays, all his books are available there. This is James Hughes, who is reflecting a more democratic, a more, I wouldn't call it libertarian, but he's really more progressive. I guess that would be a fair way of looking at him. This person is Istvan Zoltan. He is actually involved also in politics, ran for the presidency, believe it or not, and he representing a political party. There is a transhumanist party. This is David Pearce. He's British. Also, Nick Bostrom is British. He wrote the manifesto, the hedonistic imperative, which is a very important document articulating the philosophy of transhumanism. This is Natasha Moore and her husband, Max Moore. What you see behind is basically it's a, how shall I put it nicely? It's a way to preserve human bodies. It's here in Alcor. It's in Alcor. That's the name of the institution that engage in cryonics, and it's located here in Scottsdale, Arizona, very close to where I live. I'm in Phoenix, and the are very important contributors to the transhumanist movement. This is Aubrey de Grey, who is the major person behind the notion that we can postpone death almost indefinitely. So he's British also, but lives now in the United States. Who else is here? Yeah, here is Giulio Prisco, Italian transhumanist, a scientist, I'm not sure if he's an astrophysicist or just an astronomer, but he's was connected with that area, but he's also doing many other things, including creating many important games, video games that would be relevant to my argument against transhumanists later on. So what do we learn from all this? The transhumanist movement is movement of people with different agendas, different identities. I forgot to mention this woman, Martin Rothblatt she was born Martin Rothblatt, a very important entrepreneur, and has written a lot about transgenderism and transhumanism. And I may come back to say a little bit more about her. But these are some of the movers and shakers in the transhumanist movement. I forgot to mention him. That's Stefan Sorgner, a German person who is very important in European conversation. So this just to give you a taste of the people involved. You should remember, so here's a list of it. If you want just one book to read about transhumanism, I recommend that you get hold of this anthology of essays, The Transhumanist Reader. It was edited by Max Moore and Natasha Whittemore, and that would give you a lot of information, kind of who is who and who is what and where do they differ. We should also remember that there are various organizations, various foundations in various places all over the world. So this is all to give you a sense that transhumanism is not trivial. There's a lot of effort by a lot of people all over the world, cross-cultural, of course, international and transnational, and that's a reason why we should pay attention to it. And believe it or not, there's also some political parties that are not that significant, but just to show you that in the end, everything is translated into politics. You should keep in mind that all of these activities are funded by various tech entrepreneurs, and one of them, Peter Thiel, I don't have a picture of him right now, but I'm sure many of you probably know him. He's now moving more and more into politics in America. He's Austrian by birth, and we're going to hear a lot about him. and other people who make this movement possible. So I'm just suggesting to you that beyond knowing the individuals, there's quite a lot of literature right now about transhumanism. And I really recommend that people become more aware of it. Here at the top line, we have various books. They're all not this one, but the rest of them are kind of anthologies, because you really, to make sense of it, you really need to do interdisciplinary work. This is the book that I edited with my late colleague Ken Mossman. This is a book that I edited with a current colleague of mine, Ben Hurlbut. These three books, the books here at the bottom kind of row, all of them are about religion and transhumanism. That's to tell you that there's a lot of attempt to figure out how to respond to it from a religious perspective, and how or whether transhumanism itself is a religious movement and should be treated as a religious movement. I contributed to those three texts that were edited by the same group of people, same couple of people, Calvin Mercer and Tracy Trothan. And that would tell you, if you want to know where the field is, at least this book, Religion and Transhumanism, will be very useful. The two books here are edited by Ron Cole Turner, probably known to many people associated with CTNS. And that's just to tell you that scholars are also taking transhumanism seriously and engaging it more deeply. So let me move now just to say a few, kind of to elaborate a little bit more about the theme of transhumanism, and then I'll move to the critique. So in terms of the themes, I suggest to you, and I developed it in various essays, that transhumanism is ultimately about transcendence. It expresses a desire for transcendence. And you can think about the transcendence both in terms of horizontal or in terms of vertical coordinates. So by horizontal transcendence, I really mean human enhancement. Whereas by vertical transcendence, it's all really, it's much more about the cyborgization and mind uploading. But whatever it is, you have here a serious attempt to think that the human species can be other than what it actually is. So I suggest to you that we need to pay attention to it, because it captures deep impulses, maybe we can call them, that we find also in religious traditions. There's a utopian impulse, there is an apocalyptic impulse, and there is a eschatological impulse. The utopian impulse of transhumanism is evident in the aspiration or the desire to create a society in which individuals will prosper and flourish, because all the things that keep us limited will be removed. So we will be augmented physically, mentally. Our social ills such as poverty, sickness, pain, suffering, and ignorance will be eliminated. And we're going to live healthy, long life. And perpetually, we are going to postpone death. That I look at it as a utopian streak of transhumanism. The apocalyptic dimension of transhumanism is evident in the claim that the ideal future is imminent. It's happening right now. 2030 is the original date that was speculated by Ray Kurzweil for the singularity. Then it was pushed to 2045. But the singularity is an apocalyptic event that will radically transform reality. And the eschaton is imagined as a virtual kingdom in which super intelligent machines will constitute last things. So you have both utopian, apocalyptic, eschatological threads, and that's why we need to pay attention to it. And that's why some people will look much more positively than I or less critically than I do. Let me suggest to you that human enhancement, clearly we are deep into it, and that all reflects the desire to control the evolutionary process. Michael Burdett, a theologian that is probably known to many of you, said the following: that transhumanism depends upon an extent rampant and robust myth, and how its enthusiasts subsequently derive religious values from it. So Burdett, as I do, look at transhumanism as an intellectual movement that has a clear religious thrust. But at the same time, it also has serious challenges, I will say. So clearly, human enhancement is a lot of, is part of it. Another aspect that is important to transhumanists has to do with morphological freedom. Here, the idea is that we need to be free to be who we are, and nothing should be, and who we want to be, and nothing should stand in our way of becoming healthier, more beautiful, more athletic, more intelligent. And if we need to change parts of our body or even parts of even our sexuality, we can do that as well. So that idea is promoted primarily by people such as David Pierce, but also by others such as Martin Rothblatt. So here, the idea here is really that we can be whoever we are, and we can be as happy as we can, including eventually taking what one person called happy people pill. You know, we're going to take a pill and that's going to make us happy. I leave it to you to decide how serious it is. I absolutely do not share this approach, and I find it very problematic to think that happiness is associated, will come from taking a pill, basically from substance, or as we can say, substance abuse. But there's this thrust or desire for liberation of the human self from any restriction or any limitation of the body, including, of course, sexuality. And that's why transgenderism is rather prevalent among people associated with transhumanism. Where can you have the most freedom? Well, the most freedom to imagine who you are and live as you want to live is actually in cyberspace. So cyberspace has become the place where liberation from biology is experienced, or presumably experienced, because there's no connection between the body and who you are. You can be anything you want to be. And just in case you missed it, that's exactly the idea behind Zuckerberg's Meta. The vision of what Meta is going to be, in other words, how Facebook will become Meta. Meta is going to be an environment in which we will live in cyberspace, the metaverse, and it's going to be our only reality. Whether this is real or not, that's up to you to decide. I am definitely quite critical of that approach. If you ask yourself, so we talked about human enhancement, morphological freedom, the hedonistic imperative, that's the happiness people for appeal for all, anti-aging, and living kind of radical life extension. That's another very important theme in this. This is promoted primarily by Aubrey de Grey, who's involved in this kind of research. In longevity research. Cryonic is associated already, as I suggested to you, with Max More. He didn't invent it, but he's the president. Actually, he's already the past president of that, or executive president of that Alcor. The other area that many people here know much more about, I'm sure, is cyborgization and mind uploading. And here, on the one hand, we're going to find this belief that robotics, the benefits of the technological breakthroughs are quite obvious, because we have robotic limbs that give amputees the feasibility or the possibility of moving. We have brain implants that promise to help patients with Parkinson, Alzheimer, or ALS. We have deep brain stimulation. These are all examples of how this technology can definitely shape or deal with mental issues. So that's kind of part of the utopian thrust of transhumanism. But I think that it's much more than that. It's more than just helping people with Parkinson or with Alzheimer. It's actually an attempt to enhance human beings so that they can really become something else, that they can become intelligent machines by uploading their minds into those super intelligent machines, and thereby basically make the human body, and I would argue even the human species, obsolete. So one reason why I feel quite unhappy or quite critical of the transhumanist agenda is that what's at stake here is the planned obsolescence of the human species. That's really what's at stake. Now it's going to take many, many years and who knows how long, but in the meantime, the question is what's going to happen to our life in the meantime? And that leads me to the third part of my comments, and that's transhumanism is techno-idolatry. So I'm coming at the critique from a Judaic perspective. Let me suggest to you that the Judaic perspective is actually quite useful as a point of departure because the Jewish tradition is very pro-technology, very engaged in betterment of the world. The utopian impulse is also something that is shared with transhumanism. There's a pro-science stance. And this notion of the concern about playing God or the trope of playing God is not really that central to the Judaic conversation. Nonetheless, my critique is, where I'm coming at it, is that I'm quite skeptical about the futuristic speculations. And they tell us more about where you are in the present rather than the future. In other words, we don't know what the future will be, and there's no time for the future is endless, right? So it tells you more who you are now and how you imagine. So tell me how you imagine the future and I'll tell you who you are. That's kind of my approach. I also find it very problematic discourse, especially related to uploading, is based on mind-body dualism. I need more time, which I don't have right now, to explain why I hold this view. But the very notion that the human self is identified with computational rationality, that to me is very, very problematic. I'm also uneasy about the apocalyptic eschatology and the sense that everything has to happen now. There's a time factor here. Things don't happen slowly, gradually, incrementally. Everything happens now because you intervene right now. So that the rush to get things done right now is also very problematic. But it's the last issue and the issue of what I would call technological fetishism, which I think is the most difficult one, and I would like to elaborate a little bit on that. And I consider that a form of idolatry, contemporary idolatry, if you wish, and I see it in a whole range of negative social impact on our life. So let me kind of move forward in that. Why do I consider it idolatrous, and how do I relate to it from a Judaic perspective? Well, what I consider idolatrous is the veneration of technology and the worship of the human makers of technology, and especially the tech entrepreneurs who make it all possible. So this veneration is what I call idolatry. And what we venerate today are the people and the products, the technological devices and the human makers of the devices, and of course, even the companies that those people who create the devices have generated. So my inspiration, being Jewish, of course, is the Bible, and we all know the text. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in the heaven above, or in the earth beneath, or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. So the point is, the key word for me is the word serve. It's this serving we are serving them no less than they serve us. The fact that we talk about computers as we have servers, right? That's part of this conversation and of our relationship with this technology. You have also the verse from Isaiah exploring the prohibition on graven images. I want to bring to your attention two Israeli scholars, Moshe Halbertal and Avishai Margalit, who wrote already in 1992 a very important book called Idolatry, conceptual analysis of idolatry. And their insights are very, very useful here. Basically, they explain what happens in idolatry. In idolatry, in worshiping idols, the worshiper not only blurs the gap between God and the world, but also the idol takes the place of the God. So actually what happens in idolatry is precisely, I think, what happens in our relationship with technology. It's the fact that the thing itself becomes treated as divine or taken the place of God. There is a replacement going on here. And that is exactly what the Bible speaks against, and why the Bible sees a connection between idolatry and adultery. Idols pull the worshiper away from the living God in the same way that outside love interests are dangerous to a marriage. Adulterous liaisons inevitably pull the marriage apart. Like adultery, idolatry is a sin of betrayal, of disloyalty. And hence the Bible depicts God as a jealous husband who was deeply humiliated when Israel whored, that's the language of the Bible, after alien gods, namely other deities and their useless idols. So I think that that's kind of what's going on with our relationship to contemporary technology today. And what I suggest that we can do is where we can kind of find the resources to respond to it. To me, the person who is most useful is Maimonides, Moses Maimonides, the medieval philosopher. He died 1204. And what Maimonides in his God of the Perplexed help us to think is that we need to think about God in terms of radical transcendence. That you can't, that you cannot really have anything in the world, not any substance, any physical item, nothing in the world can be a replacement to God. Nothing can represent God, and nothing can be a replacement to God. And if you think in those rather radical, theoretical, if you wish, terms, you can understand why the way we treat gadgets is profoundly idolatrous and profoundly contrary to the way Maimonides told us to think about God. So a lot of the gadgets that we hold so dear to our life and we cannot live a moment without have become fetishes, and those fetishes are substitutes for God. And that's why I call it techno-idolatry. Now, if you don't trust what I tell you, that there's an idolatrous dimension here, all you need to do is to go to the Transhumanist Reader and find this essay in which Transcendent Engineering by Giulio Prisco, this Italian transhumanist, where he says the following: the ultimate realization of the dream to achieve indefinite lifespan with vastly enhanced cognitive abilities lies in leaving biology behind and moving to a new post-biological cybernetic phase of our evolution. Someday we may create God, and if we create God, then we are God. Well, in many ways, I think that the people that I'm going to talk about right now already think that they are gods, or at least they're a good replacement of God. So here are some books that I highly recommend you look at. I'm exploring a few ideas, a few areas in which you find what I would consider negative impact of the transhumanist ideas or transhumanist culture, and the way it impacts our world. So I will suggest to you that we need to think about the impact of the technology, especially artificial intelligence technology, which is crucial to the transhumanist movement. We need to think about its impact on our social life, our economic life, our political life, and even our education. So I see that I only have 10 minutes, so I'll move right into it. I think that in order to assess the merit of transhumanism, we don't have to spend time thinking whether it's plausible or not, whether it will happen or not. What we need to do is to look at the present right now. And we look at how it impacts our life in the here and now. And when we look carefully and critically at the impact of technology on our present social life, we encounter many disturbing social ills, including addictiveness, deceptiveness, shallowness, loneliness, lack of empathy, viciousness, joblessness, misogyny, racism, hate speech, and many other social ills. Now, you can say there are many other reasons why we encounter all those problems, and I agree. But I do think that there are special challenges brought upon us by the fact that we live now with this technology. And addictiveness is one of those social ills that illustrate the negative impact of AI on our socialization. So I'm not going to talk about addictiveness in general, how it could be generated by substances. I want to talk about behavioral addiction. And behavioral addiction, I think, it's not just my idea, but a lot of people have shown the connection between gambling sites, internet video platforms, streaming music hubs, of course, everything that goes on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Reddit, Imgur. There are many activities that you probably know better than I do, that all give rise to new breed of obsessions, compulsions, and addictions that barely existed during the 20th century. And that statement came from this book, Irresistible, which makes the case of what is behavioral addiction very, very compellingly. So I think we need to pay attention to the fact that now children are exposed to all this. And when adults such as Zuckerberg make young children think that and behave like savvy investors, and that's exactly what certain games do on a gaming platform called Roblox that has 43 million people of daily active users, and that includes elementary school children. So you have an environment in which children are engaged in activities which are all configured through monetization of what the avatar or the owner of the avatar can do or can make. Then you can see the complexity of this environment. So AI technology have created alternative reality, and millions of people, adults as well as children, have become addicted to it. And that to me is rather problematic. And it's problematic because we venerate human-made technology that has become our idol, namely our iGods. That's a terrific book by Craig Detweiler. And if you I have it right here by me. It's how technology shapes our spiritual and social lives, and I highly recommend you take a look at it. If you go to this book, a famous book, it's a very large book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff, you will see an analysis of what has happened to our economic life. And the connection between the economic life and our political system. Shoshana Zuboff has shown that tech companies, our new technological idols, have taken our personal data and have monetized our data for their own enrichment. Just this Sunday, she wrote in the New York Times a very moving essay in which she's basically saying to our political leaders, we've got to do a better job regulating the system, because it's really robbing us and robbing our democratic structure and our democratic society from a lot of from its integrity. And the reason that's happening is because those systems are prone to fraud, to misinformation, to disinformation that perverts democracy all over the world. So she also talks about the connection between those technologies and the rise of totalitarianism all over the world. So we need to keep that in mind, that there's nothing is innocent in this system. So the way the system have developed and our veneration of those systems, we are paying a very, very high cost for that. So while some of the people, let's say, are doing what they're doing, and his company, Blue Origin, which he considers the most important aspect of his life work, just made it to space. So to the Blue Origin may be wonderful for a few people, tech entrepreneurs like himself, but all the real problems of the world, poverty, inequality, injustice, tyranny, environmental collapse, pandemics, all those problems continue to exist. And a flight to space, as he just did not too long ago, is not going to address all of those problems. So actually, as I mentioned, Shoshana Zuboff just on November 14th wrote an essay in which she said that she called our lawmakers to regulate all of those companies much better and put limits on the profit, I'm quoting now, on the profit maximizing commercial operations that favor information corruption over integrity. Regulating extraction would eliminate the surveillance dividend, and with it, the financial incentives for surveillance. So that's her point, that these systems rob us of our freedom, political freedom, personal freedoms. In education too, every aspect of the educational world has been turned around by the focus on machine learning, and in the digital age, obviously there are benefits from it, but education also has been transformed by technology, and the whole notion of education as character cultivation, the pursuit of virtue, the pursuit of wisdom, has been replaced by what I would call commodification of education. You'll have to excuse this phone call. I cannot stop it, but we'll just ignore it. So for all of those reasons, we need to be quite critical of the culture that was created by what I consider techno-idolatry. And we need to remember that we are not gadgets. And this is exactly the message of Jeremy Lanier. You are not a gadget. And if we remember that, we also remember that we cannot become data, and we cannot be mined, we cannot be harvested for the benefit of somebody else. I think that we do need to protect what makes us truly human, and what makes us truly human is not becoming a computer. So by way of conclusion, here is a summary of what I just went over with you. By way of conclusion, let me suggest that I do take it very seriously. I do think that transhumanism is a very significant social imaginary because it gives coherence to our technological age, our technological culture. So we cannot ignore it. I also admit that it's hard to engage it because there are so many diverse themes in transhumanism, and it's hard to separate one from the other. I'm also very I'm concerned why the criticism of transhumanism has not really gained traction, and whatever people have said quite a long time ago, could be several decades ago, hasn't really stopped the movement from moving forward. And I think that the answer to that is the power of capitalism. And you can raise all sorts of ethical concerns, but capitalism will ultimately trump that. For me, I look at transhumanism as an example of a secularist faith, and I understand it historically. I can explain it, but I definitely do not share that approach. So as a Jewish intellectual historian or somewhat a theologian, if you ask me, okay, so what can we do? I do think that I can only speak about Judaism, and from a Judaic perspective, there are various ways to articulate a theological response to transhumanism by developing other kind of an alternative anthropology, an alternative theology, alternative view of what it means to be a human being. So ultimately, for me, to be a human being has to be about embodiment, has to be about relationality and sociality. And I don't want to get rid of those features that, according to the transhumanists, make us imperfect. So being imperfect, I think, is good. It's not something that we need to get rid of, because if we're perfect, we're not going to be able to engage in any kind of relational interaction. We need to think more in terms of the not yet. In other words, not to think that the ideal future is here right now, but rather, in that sense, I'm rather critical of the apocalyptic mentality, as I'm sure you got from already from this talk. And we need to live in anticipation of a better future, but not think that we can, by our own powers, bring it tomorrow. In terms of machine ethics, I think we do need to articulate machine ethics and develop especially technological virtues. There's a lot of work done on the ethics of machines and how to think about technological virtues. And I think that would be very, very useful for us. Also think that we need to identify legal principles that would enable us to regulate the companies. I'm very much for regulation and not to allow everybody to do whatever they want to do just because it's in the name of freedom or something like that. In terms of the attitude, my attitude is what Hans Jonas called the precautionary principle, namely the fact that we can do something doesn't mean that we should do it. I'm not in favor of the proactionary principle, which is promoted by many transhumanists, especially Max Moore. So caution is good, and rushing into something is not necessarily the best here. I think that we need to talk about social responsibility when we do technology assessment. And as much as possible, we need to develop responsible technologies alternative to the transhumanist futurism. So with that in mind, let me end by going back to Eric Schmidt. And Eric Schmidt, whom I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, now I'll give you again the same quote. The question of whether we would lose control of AI may be passé. Technology is already manipulating us. Lack of foresight among the lords of the cloud about where technology was headed was foolish. Schmidt, in that interview with Maureen Dowd, went on to acknowledge that a lot of people, I'm quoting, a lot of people who talk about metaverse are talking about that and they're more satisfying than the current, that metaverse is more satisfying than the current world. You're richer, you're more handsome, you're more beautiful, you're more powerful, faster. So in some years, people will choose to spend more time with their goggles on metaverse. And who gets to set the rules? The world will become more digital than physical, and that's not necessarily the best thing for human society. Jaron Lanier, the father of virtual reality, has been similarly critical of the mentality of Silicon Valley that has been obsessed with what he calls science fiction fantasy of AI. And Lanier correctly identified and criticized the mindset that leads Silicon Valley people to speak about themselves as super gods of the future. It is this mindset that makes AI technology, in his mind, in the mind of Jaron Lanier, a giant false god. So our task, I would say, is to ensure that we do not fall prey to this contemporary idolatry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rita. That was a compelling and moving case, and I look forward to reading it and thinking about it more deeply. So now we have time for some questions. Braden, will you moderate this part?
Sure. We already have some questions and comments in the question and answer and in the chat. Hava, if you want to start there. And then if you would like to ask you.
Sharing first? Would that
sure. I think that would be great.
That would be good. Okay, let me stop share. Okay, now I can go to where? To the chat or to the Q&A?
There's some in both, and there is a little bit of duplication, but you can start in either place, and then if people do want to ask a question.
You want me to okay, let me go to the Q&A first. Okay, first question from Seraphim Winslow. The post-humanist goals of transhumanism clearly parody the desiderata of Kabbalists, who want to usher in the Messianic age by transitioning from Homo sapiens to Adam Kadmon. So why are there not more critiques of this counterfeit Kabbalah from the ranks of authentic Kabbalists with genuine mystical transhumanist goal? That's an interesting question. I think it's true that Kabbalah has inspired definitely some people, and some of them are in the transhumanist movement, I'm sure. Some science fiction authors have been interested in Kabbalah, like Stanislav Lem, for example. But I'm not sure that I'll be honest with you, I don't think that Kabbalah is really the driving force here. But I think that your question is well taken, that how to interpret the Messianic thrust is what's at stake here. And I, for one, interpret the Messianic thrust as an invitation, as a beacon that gives us a certain direction, but not something that can be realized. So no human being, by definition, no created being, by definition, can become Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon is an idea that cannot be realized. I would argue that would be the right reading of Kabbalah. So you can read Kabbalah in all sorts of ways. Kabbalah can inspire all sorts of ways of talking about the future, but Kabbalah can be easily misinterpreted or misapplied, or you can do a lot of things with Kabbalah, which would be quite different. Which Kabbalist, what exactly you're talking about? We need to get into the details of it. All right. Yeah, so what other questions? We have comments on Frank Tipler's Physics of Immortality. It's been a long time since I read it. Actually, maybe Bob probably knows the book better than I do. But I think that, yes, Tipler thinks about information as the new God. That's the one thing I do remember from the book. So you're right that among some theoretical physicists, there is readiness and openness toward this kind of an understanding of how to bring this reality, ideal reality, via technology or technoscience. It doesn't speak to me, but maybe Bob could comment more knowingly about the physics of immortality.
Well, just one comment, thanks. It's sort of a reverse to transhumanism, because it's these artificial intelligences in the far future that remember us, and in that sense resurrect us into them. So it's got all the elements you're talking about, but it's sort of a reverse scenario. I'll just say, but I know Frank pretty well, and he's kind of an ex-Baptist. So
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So I cannot say that I know the book well enough to address, give you a good answer, and that's responding to the question by Tim Tins or Tynes. But that would be my take on it. I think that some physicists, again, Bob can help us here. Some physicists, like my theoretical physicist, like my colleague Barry Ritchie, have been very critical of the very idea that those fantasies are actually feasible. So he argues on the basis of his knowledge of physics that the physics does not support the fantasy or the scenario. So that's why I don't talk about the feasibility, because I don't know enough to talk about it intelligently, but I would like to talk about the impact of this scenario, because the scenario is here, and the scenario engages all aspects of our life. So is it good or is it not good? And I see many problems, as you just heard from me. There's a question here from Suleiman Mepes, is that what it is? Thank you for this interesting and important talk. Thank you. My question, taking the unevenness of human conditions and cultures across the globe, who will be more affected by this transhumanist movement or transhumanism movement? That's a very good question. I definitely think that there is a economic dimension to it. This is not, transhumanism is not going to be, how shall I put it, a social force that would deal with problems of poor countries, let's say. So who has access to it? The rich, the wealthy, the well-connected, the educated. You have to have a certain level of economic wherewithal to be engaged in all this. Think of Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin or Elon Musk's. Who is involved in that? Now he thinks that eventually everybody will be involved, let's say, in space colonization. That it will become a middle-class movement. Maybe it will. I don't know. But the question is, what happens in the middle, or what happens in the meantime? Not what will eventually happen. That's my angle here. My angle is always focus not on the ultimate, but on the penultimate, because you live in the penultimate moment. So I would say that most of humanity will not benefit from it. Yet some gadgets, I have to say, smartphones, for example, are now all over Africa, for example, in very, very poor communities. They don't have a lot of other things, but they do have smartphones. So does it improve their life? Yes, to some extent it does. But does that mean that other aspects of transhumanism are operating in Africa? Probably not. Okay, so that's kind of how I look at it as a first world kind of luxury that is developed, by certain people have access to it. Most other people will know. That would be my take. Let's see, what else do we have here? Jews understand, another question. Jews understand that there are several levels to the soul. Definitely in the Middle Ages, that's a true statement. Medieval philosophy definitely spoke at least about 3 or even in some cases 5 aspects of the soul, not just one. Why is there not mention in your critique of the fact that the current model of transhumanism only touches the nefesh, but wholly ignores the fate of the neshama, the ruach, and the chaya? So actually, that's an interesting question. I think that to some extent what transhumanists are saying, so those who don't know Hebrew, nefesh refers to the biological functions of the human being. So that's the physiologically based activity of the human. Neshama, ruach, and chaya, those are the more spiritual dimension, if you wish, or the less rooted, less physiologically based aspects of the human spirit. To be honest with you, I actually think it's the other way around. I think that what transhumanists really want to accomplish, or what they claim to accomplish, is the technologization of the neshama. So both the ruach and the neshama, they don't care maybe about chaya, but the ruach and the neshama, they definitely think that they can be technologized, that's what happens in mind uploading, that's what happens in computational rationality, maybe I'll call it this way. So there's no room for the categories and the understanding of the Judaic understanding. And what you gave us is, of course, suggests that you know something about Kabbalah, because that's part of the Kabbalistic terminology. So I think that, you see, not only they definitely want to get rid of the nefesh, but they even go further and they suggest that you can computerize the neshama, kind of, to put it bluntly. I hope I answered that question. Benjamin Garrity asked the following: can you throw more light on metaverse it will be very much appreciated. Okay, I do not feel myself. Maybe Braden, could you help us more with metaverse? What I'm going to give may not do justice to the question that was just asked.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think I have a lot to add to that specific definition, except that it's something that Facebook is, or now Meta is, really pouring a lot of money into. About $10 billion is my understanding of various projects. But again, this is sort of a thing that is just starting, and that there's a lot of question about whether or not they're going to be able to pull it off. But it would be really sort of a digitization of the social sphere into the online world. So people would spend more time interacting with each other in an environment not even like this, but something that's more completely augmented reality or virtual reality, sort of ignoring the day-to-day aspects of life in a sense. I think sort of a stylized version of that you might see in the book Ready Player One, the fictional account of sort of a virtual reality world.
Yes, that's a very well, that's a very good answer. I think that the way I understand it, that all of us think of a work environment, let's say in the office. The way metaverse will work is that we're all going to be avatars. So each one of us will have an avatar, and obviously, theoretically, we can change the avatar as we see fit. So God knows what that will do to human psyche. But in metaverse, we will do everything. We will shop, we will do business, we will create relationships. The avatars that I've seen that Zuckerberg has generated are actually cartoonish. So it's really interesting. It's a lot less developed than what we see in Zoom, when we can actually see ourselves rather than hide behind an avatar. But my sense is that everything eventually will become you'll do your business, including instead of talking on Facebook or interacting on Facebook, you will do it in metaverse. So we will all be one huge, gigantic cartoon world, and that to me is disastrous, to say the least. I can't imagine any positive virtue, any merit to the world as Zuckerberg imagines. And why he imagines it now, and other people who know the politics of that company better than I do can comment on it. But there probably is a reason why we are now pushed into metaverse, because Facebook is not doing so well under the new attention to what's happening there. So I find that all of those companies, and if you really, I highly recommend that you read Zubov's book, because her analysis of what's happening to us when we have become data to be sold, and to people making money off our information, and that to me is a real, and to her of course, is a real problem. Where are we now? Shall I go to the chat and see what's happening on the chat?
Yeah, there's some long form comments in there. So if you're interested in looking at the questions, you might start with Harry Skaith's question. But I think we're short on time, so you may want to just look at some of them and decide which ones you think are most compelling, or those you think you can answer best.
Okay, so we talked about Kabbalah already. Okay, shouldn't we include? There's a question from Perry Skieth. Shouldn't we include a definition of human? When God breathes the soul into the body, isn't that what we know as a human? Whether the body is biological or robotic may be secondary. So in a way, there's an old transhumanism in which biological body is viewed as the house for the human essence, viewed as all of our earthly experiences, and the new transhumanism in which non-biological body is the house for the human essence. So isn't the real issue the nature of the soul, not the body? Okay, so let me see. I think that what I will take issue with is a kind of the dualistic assumption that underlines what you just said, underlines this question. I'm going to quote you the Hebrew, when God breathed into the human, it's not that the soul is something as a separate substance. I think that what's unique about the biblical approach is precisely the integration, if you wish, or the, how shall I put it, the integrity of the physiological and the more than physiological. So the human being, at least in the biblical perspective, and I think that throughout the Jewish tradition, the rabbinic for sure, it's a little bit more complicated in medieval philosophy, but it's really not dualistic, or at least they try to minimize the dualism. And I believe that the dualism comes a lot more from the Greek perspective, from the Platonic tradition, especially less so the Aristotelian tradition. So how to negotiate the challenge, the differences between a monistic view and a dualistic view is really the challenge of the history of Western philosophy. So in many ways, yeah, we haven't sorted the problem, but I think that transhumanism is more dualistic than definitely the Judaic perspective. I think I'm saying something that is correct. Now, I also would take issue, and that's on the organic versus the robotic. I think that the Judaic position is definitely favoring the organic. You are from dust, and to dust shall you return. So that organic emergence and then return to it in death is precisely what Judaism focuses on. Whereas transhumanism wants to get rid of death. Death, really, eventually, according to transhumanist perspective, we will have dominion over death, and that I think is an impossibility. It's not desirable, and it's not anything that will make our life any better. But that's exactly what it's about. So it's ultimately, as Aubrey de Grey put it, they're engaged in a crusade against death. That's how he puts it. And I think that the crusade against death is just misconceptualized and misdirected. So of course I don't want to die. Nobody wants to die, but also death and limits and temporality and recognizing that there is a limit to everything is exactly the heart of the meaning of life. And what they're trying to do is to get rid of that boundary. So you have to decide which world you want to live in. I prefer to live in a temporal world, in a finite world, in a world where there are limits. Even though there is the sadness of death, the death of the people who are dear to us, and of course one's own death. So whereas Aubrey de Grey would tell you a story that he can overcome death, or at least postpone death. The metaphor that he uses is the metaphor of the car, a well-built car that you take to the garage every 3 years or every X amount of years, and everything will be, regenerated. So it's kind of perpetual regeneration of the body. I don't think that that's a good thing to envision or to aspire to. There is another question from Seraphim here. I don't remember the last, the surname. It's less idolatry than it is blasphemy. A sharper critique would see it clearly as a violation of the commandment against taking the Lord's name in vain, God's name, Yud He Vav He, being the means by which we transition from meager state of Homo sapiens to the divine theosis of Adam Kadmon. Okay. You can we are not so far apart, but I just don't believe that theosis can happen. I don't believe that it's not only that it's feasible, I don't think that it's actually conceptually makes any sense, because I don't believe that ideals can or should be realized. I think that we should live toward the ideal, not imagine that we can realize the ideal. Sorry about that. All right. we have the issue of cryonics.
We have time.
here. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, we have time for 2 more questions.
2 more questions.
We have time. Yeah.
I see it's the same person here. Let's say somebody else.
You have reached 40446-9655. Please.
Okay, so also it's a question about the relationship to Adam Rishon and Adam Kadmon. Okay, it's the same kind of question. Okay, do you see, Braden, do you see anything that you would like, that you think needs to be responded to?
I think maybe the question from Derek Sherman. It's sort of another question about the Genesis account.
The Genesis
of
story
bringing
about
life.
the creation of Adam or Adam uses the dust of the earth, but also requires the breath of God. So we went through this already, I guess. What does this imply about what it means to be human and the possibility for mind uploading? So for me, the answer to this question would be that it means that mind uploading is not an option, and it's not really what life is all about. It's about, to be a human is to be organically based, temporal, finite, prone to sickness, to imperfections. That's what it means to be human. So imperfection is human, or to use Nietzsche, to err is human. So whereas what they're seeking or aspiring to is perfection, which I think is unachievable and also shouldn't be the guiding, at least the way they understand perfection. I think it's not going to lead us to live life in a more humane way. So it kind of, the answer to the question, to me, it's always about how to live more humanely. And I don't believe that the technological world as presented to us by these ideologues or by these companies that articulate those ideas make us more humane. I think that the technological vision actually make us less caring, less involved with other people, less compassionate, less involved. Why? Because it's all about the veneration or the praise. It's more than praise. It's really veneration, adoration of the new gadgets. Think of the fact that we are changing our smartphone. We are supposed to change our smartphone what? Every 8 months or something, every 2 years at most. And if you hold an old a gadget, an old smartphone, you're unable to function in the world. That to me is very problematic. Not just economically, but socially. There are many aspects here that make it very problematic, but we are supposed to always move forward, right? Move forward, do it, and somebody else is going to make, is going to profit from our changes of, constant changes of our technology. So we're never satisfied. We're never happy. There's always going to be the next iPhone. So it's iPhone 12, iPhone 13. What's the difference between iPhone 13 and iPhone 12? Not substantive, but you're encouraged to buy it. And if you don't, then you're considered, I don't know what, backward or not with it. So that's why I considered it problematic.
That was a really rich and detailed comment that really summarizes your whole presentation tonight. I think it's a good place to thank you. That was really phenomenal. Thank you, Hava.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hava. See you soon. Take care.
See you. So, yeah.